And now I'd love to move to introduce our first speaker, my partner, my client, my friend, Jessica Carroll. I'll tee this up with a little bit of an introduction. Jessica is the senior director of MLB Photos. Many of you know that MLB generally operates one of the most sophisticated fan engagement platforms around. This spans broadcast, this spans social channels, multiple social channels. This spans websites, not only the league's website, but the team's websites itself, and also a very active player social program as well. When I did the math, I was thinking that across MLB, there's 30 teams, there's 162 games in a season. There's the preseason, the postseason, there's special events like the All-Star game, which requires a tremendous amount of media work. So you're looking at something like 22,000 innings of baseball, during which every second of the action, there is content being captured, and that content needs to be moved out to stakeholders and moved out to the fans ultimately. So, and there are so many people throughout MLB that need that content really to do their jobs effectively. So Jessica and her team has really mastered the complexity of this workflow. In various scenarios, the content takes various different routes to get where it needs to be, and they seem to do it with what looks like ease. I know it takes a lot to pull it off, but when you're the fan and you see that Instagram photo sitting on your phone and it's there before any other media outlet, it's a pretty magical thing. So Jessica's here to talk to us about their workflow and about how they manage so much of that complexity and the intent behind it, the goals that they're achieving at Major League Baseball. Hi, Jessica.
Hey, Andrew. Nice to be here. Thanks for that warm introduction.
Great to see you.
Great to see you. It's amazing that it's been a year since the last time I participated in the PhotoShelter Summit. I don't know where that year has gone, but happy to be back and thrilled to be part of this amazing lineup of speakers today. Today, my plan is to give you a little bit of an inside look into Major League Baseball's integrated workflow and expose a little bit of that mess that Andrew mentioned earlier. Not always, we don't always get to see the behind the scenes, but this community is great and a great opportunity to collaborate. So I'll give you a little peek behind the curtain. So first, I'll give you a little bit of background on what Major League Baseball Photos does. We are here to document and preserve the history of the game at all levels. We maintain a film and digital archive of our historic assets, and we advocate for photographers and photography, as well as oversee the on-site photo operations at MLB events. Major League Baseball has players at the top level of their game, and I believe our photography should reflect that. Our mission is to capture baseball photography of the highest quality. MLB and team photographers have unparalleled access. They can go behind the scenes and tell the stories with their images that no one else can tell. By being embedded with the team throughout the season, starting with spring training when pitchers and catchers report, that allows them to develop a comfort level and a rapport with the players that lends itself to that intimate level of coverage. They can be there for all moments, both big and small. What I consider to be one of the most important tasks we're charged with is to showcase the unique content MLB and club photographers capture in as many ways possible without adding to the workload of that photographer. Many people outside of the photo industry are unaware of the fact that photographers' work does not stop when they put down the camera, especially in this day and age of digital. There's a tremendous amount of work to be done on the content management side once the photos have been taken. This is where I see an opportunity for us to leverage the advances in technology and find ways to work smarter and not harder. PhotoShelter is a key tool in our workflow that allows us to do just this. As a bit of background, MLB has been using PhotoShelter for about 15 years, and it's become an integral piece of our workflow. It functions as our searchable photo database, and being that it's web-based, all of our assets have been seamlessly accessible as we've shifted to remote work over the past year. Our users comprise over 600 stakeholders across MLB clubs, MLB departments, and external partners. They have the ability to log in through our portal and search through the library's assets to fulfill various end uses. Additionally, we have integrations in place that allow us to feed images directly to our licensing partner, Getty Images, and to Greenfly, which feeds the player's social program. The integrated account feature has played an essential role in elevating the functionality of this tool. It's allowed us to continue to evolve and enhance our photographers' ability to execute tasks without that additional workload. The integrated account feature was born from a desire to share photos between PhotoShelter libraries without added upload and download time. As Andrew mentioned, we have a lot of teams. MLB produces a lot of content, and finding a seamless way to share that content has been really beneficial to us. One of our club photography managers tasked his staff with logging the time that they spend on each request. It doesn't seem like it at the time, but the few minutes you spend curating photos, downloading them, emailing a contact, and then for the recipient to download the images and upload them to their end destination, all of that time adds up, especially if you multiply that by the many times that these processes occur throughout a day, week, and month. By eliminating the in-between steps, we allow photography to be shared and distributed between teams and between MLB and the teams in a much more efficient manner. As you can see, once activated, integrated account sharing has allowed us to cut the number of steps required to fulfill a request in half, and eliminating the most time-consuming steps of uploading and downloading. As we all know, 2020 presented challenges on many levels. I'm focusing on sports today. But once our abbreviated season began, we knew that covering baseball would look very different. Access in particular was extremely restricted and required us to rely much more heavily on collaboration. Travel was not as readily accessible or safe. There were extra logistical layers to consider, and many player areas were completely restricted and off limits. Not only did this require photographers to get creative with how they captured content, but it strengthened the network of MLB and team photographers across the country as we leaned on one another for support to document this historic season. If a player was called up, the visiting team may have to rely on home team photography to document a debut. There were times MLB photographers' access was limited at a ballpark, and we relied upon the team photographers to document milestones. These changes in access really underscored our need for an integrated system. Even despite all of the access challenges we had throughout the 2020 season, these are a few highlights of some of what our photographers were able to capture. Sometimes they had to get creative and create the atmosphere. We didn't quite have the fan atmosphere we would have in a normal year. And finding, opportunities to capture content that is still evergreen and timeless, and not just marking it as a 2020 moment, was definitely a challenge. As we approached the 2021 season, it started to become apparent that we'd have a full season, starting at our normal time with pitchers and catchers reporting in February. We spent months preparing COVID protocols and ways we'd be able to capture the content we typically capture during spring training photo day under these new restrictions. It became evident that the schedule was going to be just about the only normal thing to start off the season. Our photographers were required to go through intake testing to be admitted into restricted player areas. And with photo day just on the heels of the winter storm that had much of the South in a deep freeze, we had the added layer of shipping delays, which caused the perfect storm, if you will, and resulted in about half of our photographers' tests not making it to the lab in time to clear them to work for photo day. This was something that we didn't learn until about 6 p.m. on the eve of our first photo day, prompting us to start working the phones and really tapping into that strong network of photographers that thankfully we have in place. We're very lucky and fortunate to have an amazing group of photographers at our MLB clubs, and they were more than willing to help out. Through this ultimate collaboration, we captured headshots and portraits of players across all 30 teams in time to satisfy the scoreboard and broadcast needs for our games. It was an added coup that we were able to add some of these very photos to decorate our new office building at 1271 Avenue of the Americas. And now, as life returns to some semblance of normal, through these amazing collaborative efforts, several of MLB's marquee players are there outside of our building waiting to greet New Yorkers as the city comes back to life. MLB is thrilled and fortunate to partner with PhotoShelter to make these goals a reality, and we look forward to the continued evolution of our relationship.
Thanks for that presentation, Jessica. Outstanding. I love the, it's always strikes me that photographers are the ones that kind of come up with the solutions when, like you sort of your A through Z list of things that might go wrong, all go wrong, and then that next thing goes wrong. Photographers are still able to kind of pivot and come up with something to make the very best of a situation. So I love that, the media day, portrait day anecdote. And it sounds like it was a great win for you and your team.
Yeah, you have to be nimble, I'd say, to be in this industry.
I can imagine. I'll kick off with a couple questions that I had, and we can let the audience submit questions either through Slack. Through Slack is probably the very best. So, and as they come up, I'll share them with you as well. My first is really around kind of like your broader stakeholder world, and maybe you can kind of, I know you touched on it a bit in that you have about 600 different people throughout the organization that are accessing photos at any given time. So maybe you could tell us about some of the biggest ones, and how have their needs really kind of changed over time, and how that impacts your workflow.
Yeah, absolutely. Our users are our customers, and that spans, like I mentioned, MLB departments. We are a service department, and we are here to facilitate the needs of marketing, design, editorial, PR, all of the various internal MLB departments, as well as the clubs and our external partners, our corporate partners. We, over the past couple decades, we've obviously seen a huge emergence of digital, and then it boomed, and now it's just completely taken over. And the cost of using visual content digitally is a much lower barrier for entry than that of traditional print. So the activations in the digital space have just been much higher, and that the dominance of social media has evolved to the point where it's a requirement for partners to use visual content to really stay relevant. So internally, we prioritize those digital platforms, and we're constantly creating new content to keep up with the rate of consumption by the fans in the game. And then the amount of content required to satisfy the needs of a season has drastically changed over time. When we were printing publications, you could get by with a few great photos of a player, for about 30 publications printed a year, maybe a monthly or weekly magazine. But now with social media, that consumption is daily. So as that volume has increased, it's underscored the importance of leveraging the technology available and creating an efficient workflow to keep up with that volume so that we can fulfill real-time needs.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I can only imagine how the kind of just the expansion of, I guess, the expectations of being like, instead of just that one amazing select photo that you might kind of ship around to all the different stakeholders. Now it's like, let's see the entire shoot, or let's see, I want all different angles and options to choose from, and people tend to think that it's easy to capture, so I better be able to get as much of it as possible.
Well, it's funny because in our game right now, Otani is a great example. He's really hot. And, we've got New Era Japan wanting photos of him. New Era domestically, he just announced, his participation in the Home Run Derby last week through his Instagram account, which was a great, coup for our player social program. And so there's so much content that people want of him. But, then if he's not playing or he's injured, you want him in his home uniform. And, when you start to parse it down, if you need pitching shots of him, he doesn't pitch all that often. So, you really have to be strategic with how you, plan that content coverage to be able to produce enough content to satisfy the needs. And that, with someone like him, there's never enough.
Yeah, and I can imagine with the league's relationships with the clubs, when any given club has a player that gets super hot, suddenly that demand, kind of like that focus on that individual club gets higher as well.
For sure.
You touched on the player social. I'm curious how that program works and how that's also driven kind of some innovation into your workflow.
Yeah, so that was a brainchild of the content marketing group, and it's really been a program that's taken off over the past few years. It's been an amazing opportunity to take fans inside the game and give them a firsthand look at what happens both on and off the field. There's a really, like I mentioned, strong appetite for content from the players in particular. And, our photographers and content creators across MLB and the teams are, really tailoring their coverage to meet those needs. It's a great example of our integration with PhotoShelter and Greenfly. It's allowed us to seamlessly deliver content directly to the players without the additional upload and download time or a need to switch platforms. Right now, we've allowed MLB team photographers to connect. They can FTP photos directly into PhotoShelter or submit through the integrated account photos into MLB's PhotoShelter. And through the use of metadata, we've created rules, and that just routes the photos directly to a Greenfly folder for the players themselves. It takes away any lag time and intermediary steps, so it's been really seamless. Team photographers have told us how great it is that they could take a photo, have a conversation with the player on the field about it, and then tell them that it's going to be waiting for them in the Greenfly app.
Is there a handful of players or a single player that's just like kind of the king of social media?
It's funny. There are a handful that are, Yu Darvish is actually the highest followed player in MLB across, I think, all the platforms. It's
global
yeah.
appeal. Yeah.
But there are some that take to it really well and that are really excited and want to participate. I think we have a lot of players, so you're going to get a lot of different personalities. You still have some who shy away from it a bit and prefer a private life, but a lot of the young fun players are having a good time with it and really putting their personalities out there. So it's fun to see that.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing to think about, like when you look at like individual teams kind of following, the leagues following, and then the players following, and some players are just like out off the charts in terms of the following that they have. So their ability to generate engagement, basically with the same content, you have all these different kind of channels that you can put it out through.
Yeah, and it's just another way of us broadening our reach. So really tapping into those different audiences. It's just a great way to get the game out to more people.
Makes sense. So I'm curious. I'm thinking, and a few questions are starting to roll in now from the listening audience, and one that I'm wondering about is I'm guessing that there's some people who are watching with some jealousy because they see that you've been able to, let's say, convince, or that you operate within an organization that sees the value of capturing great visual content, how it can be valuable to the organization and disseminating it. So they're making investments in not just capturing the content, but also the workflow as well. Do you have any sort of tips or suggestions for how somebody in a different organization might be able to kind of sell their ideas for more content investment?
Yeah, I think it's it's definitely great to work with an organization that supports visual content, and we've been very fortunate at baseball since I've been there. We've always had the support and the appreciation for us, the historic documentation aspect of our sport. 10, 15 years ago, there wasn't this need to consume constantly, but we still placed a lot of value on visual content and capturing visual content, and owning our history. That's another piece of it that hasn't always been the case for MLB. We really only started focusing on owning our copyright in the 90s. So
Yeah.
that's something that definitely has to evolve and has to be underscored as a valuable thing to focus on. But we do a lot of internal marketing. So, it's funny because, we were just talking about how we tap into the player social program and, a lot of these external facing tools to market the game of baseball. But one of my biggest roles is internal marketing and pitching other departments and internal stakeholders on the value of photography. And fortunately, we have a lot of external stakeholders who prove the point for us. Our partners really do consume a lot of visual content. In my last summit talk with PhotoShelter, I talked about, the great case study we had with Nike, where, they had real-time photos coming out of an all-star game, and they were posting them on, there was a David Wright home run at the 2013 or hit at the 2013 all-star game, and we sent out a batting photo, and they had it posted to their social, to Instagram, before he even hit first base. So just
Wow.
having those partners want to engage with us like that helps us make the case internally for the value of visual content. So it's kind of, it all plays into one another. These are different aspects of content creation and value that it's kind of like a chicken or egg thing, but constantly liaising between our internal stakeholders and sharing the value that external stakeholders see in that content.
Makes a lot of sense. It's kind of like it's never a one-time ask. You need to kind of market yourself, build the influence inside of the organization, make sure people know that you're available to them and that they can have this great resource, and then you have your advocates for when you need to ask for resources.
Absolutely.
So one question from the audience was, in terms of technology and technology innovation, what do you see going forward? Sorry, for the MLB workflow moving forward, are there technology innovations that you plan to avail yourself of?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest areas that's untapped for us is AI. I think working to make the machines work for us is something that we want to keep on our keep in our sights and keep working towards. I think when we can plug into a computer that can see a photo and identify things the same way a human eye would, that'll get us to a really great point to be able to turn this stuff around real time. One of our we pride ourselves in what we put in PhotoShelter as a finished product. So while it is this, kind of transient, integral piece of our workflow, everything that lands in there, we want that to be fully captioned, cropped, toned. So helping us get from camera to that finished product faster, anything we can lean on to get there will be beneficial. We're there with a lot of it, but we still follow AP style captioning. So our captions are not there just to be a search tool. It's not just for SEO. It's actually to go up on Getty as a fully polished caption, so that a newspaper or any other journalistic outlet could download it and have it with caption ready. So finding those ways to translate the language that we need in AI is kind of the next challenge.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The robots are getting there.
They are.
They will be there. And sometimes it's all about getting the right kind of data together to combine. So I would not be surprised if we're there pretty soon with those robust captions.
Maybe next year. That's what we talked about.
Yeah. And another question is from Nicole: is MLB using password protected folders to share photos, or are people given access to certain folders throughout your library? I'm guessing it's probably a mix of both. I think
It is
so.
a
This
mix.
is more of a granular setup structure
Yeah, no,
question for
but it's
access.
a valuable one, and it's important. You know, a few years ago, we actually did a pretty big overhaul. You know, we tapped into some resources with PhotoShelter and did the little consulting work and looked at our library structure, and we put everything that we wanted or were okay with being public facing in kind of an approved parent folder. So beneath that, we have our game folders. We, you know, under approved, we have year folders and then different categories of events for each year. So someone could navigate through that, but it's also fully searchable. And so we put most of our external or our users within, they have access to that approved folder. And that really helps us know that anything in there is basically intended for public facing. We separately have like a restricted or unreviewed folder or incoming folder for things that still need work. So the 600 users that I mentioned before all have access to that approved folder. One of our goals was to make the system work for us and a little bit more self-sufficient. So the goal is for that group of users to be able to log in and find images on their own. But we do have some users, you know, especially external stakeholders, that will curate a gallery and send a password protected gallery to as well. But we're trying to shift away from just creating and searching and letting it be more self-service.
That makes sense. So it's kind of like taking advantage of the flexibility there, given that there's so many different scenarios based on who needs what, really, and their relationship. Like, is it a one-time thing? Is it a long-term sponsor or something, or stakeholder? Great. Well, I think that's about it for questions. I just got the 2-minute warning. So is there anything else that you'd like to add about your workflow or your mission for those listening today?
No, I think the only thing I would just, you know, mention that I touched on earlier, but I just really appreciate the relationship and the fact that it is a partnership, and that, you know, in working with PhotoShelter, you know, we've been able to develop a system that really does work for us. You know, we're not just handed an out-of-box solution and said, this is what you get. You know, we have a space where we can give feedback, and I love that PhotoShelter wants it to work for us to the point that, you know, you have a willingness to listen and reception, you know, are receptive to that feedback. So I think through that, it's true collaboration, you know, in that sense. And through that, we've really come to a solution that's great for all of us.